All right, welcome everyone and Happy New Year. This is the Cluster API project meeting, the first of 2026. Cluster API is a subproject of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which can essentially be summarized as please treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so, please be kind to each other. And if you'd like to talk, please raise your hand and I will call on you. So at the beginning of our meetings, we like to give a little chance for new attendees to say hello to the community and introduce themselves. So I will be quiet for a few seconds here. And if that sounds like something you would like to do, please feel free to say hi. All right. We will move on then to our open proposal readouts. I guess, do we have anyone here who would like to speak about either of the open proposals? The independent worker topology versions or external CA inserts?
I can maybe mention that it's on my and Fabrizio's list to take a look at both proposals in January, hopefully sooner than the end of January. But yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I'm sure that'll be appreciated. Okay, so let's move into our discussion topics, and I'm going to hand it over to Stefan, who's got the first one with some stuff about runtime hook APIs. Take it away.
Yep. So basically, now that in-place and chained upgrade is done with the last release, we now have a bit more time to work on some other cleanup stuff. And one part of that is basically making sure that we are that the API version thing is moving ahead as planned, and that everything works out well, and that they have all the angles covered. One of the angles that you have to cover is essentially runtime SDK and the lifecycle hooks. So what we did 2 releases ago is that we introduced beta 2 for regular APIs, and they're all now on beta 2, and at some point we're going to drop beta 1. What we did not do at the time, because we simply did not have the bandwidth for it, and also because, given it's an alpha API, we thought we can cut some corners there sooner or later. So we did not touch our runtime hooks yet. What does it mean? So basically, when you register lifecycle hook or topology mutation and a bunch of other stuff, we are sending a request to a webhook server, we get a response back. A bunch of those requests have core copy API types embedded. So I don't know, the before cluster upgrade hook has a v1 beta 1 cluster embedded. And that is still a v1 beta 1 cluster today. Soonish, v1 beta 1 will become unserved and sooner or later go away. And then we would have a problem with our lifecycle hook API because we would try to embed a type that basically doesn't exist anymore. So we had to start thinking about how do we treat the lifecycle hook types so that they will keep working even if beta 1 is gone. The proposal from Fabrizio and me is essentially that we do a quick fix here, which is basically changing the types. So there are v1 alpha 1, just that as a disclaimer up front. So the idea is to change the types to basically just bump them from beta 1 to beta 2. So that basically in copy 1.12 and before cluster upgrade had a beta 1 cluster in there. If you bump the next version, there is a beta 2 cluster. It is a breaking change. We think it's fine given the v1 alpha 1 API conventions, or in general the conventions around alpha 1 APIs. We also think it's a lot less disruptive than trying to basically, I mean, not trying to, but to bump the entire runtime hook API to v1 alpha 2, force everyone to bump from alpha 1 to alpha 2, and then implement the corresponding machinery to be able to handle that on client side. And yeah, that's not a plan like long term, but that would be basically a way that we could get away with it for like this bump from beta 1 to beta 2. I do think that when this happens the next time, which is basically realistically v1 beta 3 or whatever version comes after beta 2, then you should have the corresponding machinery in place, and that should be also part of like the let's say the machinery that we need for that. Be able to handle different runtime SDK versions should be part of the runtime SDK graduation. And then we have to see what it means for individual hooks. But yeah, sooner or later we need a solution for that. We just basically thinking like this time, this one should be fine. We looked into the changes. It should be very minimal in our opinion. Basically, for the stuff that most people are looking at regarding a beta 1 cluster or beta 2 cluster, I think there's enough stuff identical that it doesn't really matter. I mean, it can break depending on which fields you're looking at. But for example, if you always run a certain version of your runtime extension with a certain version of cluster API, the types won't change. The types will only change if you bump cluster API, then you also have to bump your runtime extension essentially. If you don't bump, then you might be passing a type where basically core copy sends you a beta 2 and you receive a beta 1, but most of the fields are identical, so you still have them. So that's why, yeah, that's all I have to say essentially. There's a PR open to do that. Basically ask for feedback here. And yeah. And maybe just like the short TLDR of V1 alpha, no, sorry, not V1, alpha APIs in general is you can do whatever you want with them. You can drop them, you can add them, you can literally do whatever you want, if I remember it correctly. Obviously, we're not just doing whatever we want. We try to be still very careful and only do things that are justifiable. But I think that's like at least the rules.
Yeah, Fabrizio, you raised your hand.
Yeah, just to echo what Stefan said, we are proposing this because it seems the less disruptive way to do it, and also the quickest. But the less disruptive seems it is the driving reason for. Just to bring it up, Stefan was talking about, maybe in future, before graduating runtime SDK, we have to have a full conversion mechanism in place. Maybe there are also other options. Maybe we can decide that we will have we sort of align runtime extension version to the main API version. So when we cut a new API version, we cut a new runtime API version, and so on and so forth. So basically, they go end by end. This is an option. We will decide at a certain point because we have to figure it out. Let me say a sustainable way to do so, because also having a conversion mechanism takes work, takes effort, and there are not many people working on this. And so, yeah, we will figure it out, the best compromise for everyone. But if folks have opinion, it is the right time to bring it up. So we can consider them down the line.
Thanks. This is like, I feel like this is fairly complicated, but it's also kind of straightforward in some ways. Does anyone else have questions or comments about this for Stefan? It sounds like, when this goes into place, people using the runtime extensions will need to update. Will everyone need to be able to do these updates? Or to update from the V1 beta 1 to V1 beta 2, I guess?
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence?
So I'm trying to understand this, and I guess like
Yeah.
this is really focused on the runtime extensions that we have, right? So like if a user currently isn't using those extensions, then they're not going to be hit by this necessarily. But if you are using these extensions, then you're going to need to upgrade, you're going to need to manually update from V1 beta 1 to V1 beta 2 in the types of the objects that you're using. That's essentially the core here.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what usually would happen in like the relatively happy path is you have a certain version of cluster API and you deployed it in combination with a certain version of your runtime extension, right? Then when you want to deploy a new version of cluster API, you bump the Go dependency in your runtime extension. By bumping the Go dependency, you automatically get like before cluster upgrade structure that I just mentioned, and this time it will have the beta 2 cluster. So if something relevant for you changed, you got a compile issue, you fix that compile issue, then you have new version of runtime extension and you can deploy it in combination with the other one. But yes, it affects only people implementing a runtime extension.
Right, exactly. And
Everyone
what
else is not.
Fabrizio was talking about in terms of the complexity of like, having an automated conversion or like just a maintenance around it and everything like that. Obviously that would be helpful, but it's going to be, it requires work, people to kind of back it up and everything.
Yeah, I think sooner or later we need it, but it's just we don't have the time for it really at the moment. That's the thing. I mean, we did not have the time for what we're doing right now when we did the beta 2 release. I don't know who remembers, that was a huge release. But yeah, sooner or later. This has to come there for runtime SDK.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you explaining it and giving more context. I think like optimistically, like I would love to see the community of runtime extension developers we have, kind of like, is there a way that we can invite more collaboration from that, group of users who are kind of like on the front lines of this. But yeah, I don't have a good perception into like, what is that community like? How many people are using the runtime extensions, et cetera?
Yeah, what I can, you first?
If I may, there is also another angle. So it is not only the type that you are getting that must be changed. So for instance, if you are generating patches with runtime extension, you should start sooner or later to generate patches for V1 beta 2 copy types. So you have to do changes to your runtime extension also for other reasons. So this is why one part of the story, because we consider this the less evil of the option on the table. Because yeah, you have to do changes because V1 beta 1 is going away. You cannot keep generating patching for V1 beta 1. This will sooner or later fail. So do the work for the patches, do the work for the type that you get, and which we did it in our test extension. They are not, of course, production code, but it was pretty easy because, yeah, we are consuming a metadata type that has labels and annotation. This type is not called A, it is called B. It is imported from a different package. This worked basically flawless. It's changed the import. It worked right away. Some other changes are maybe a little bit more complex, but
I can add to that a little
yeah.
bit. Yeah. So basically, I audited like what the way that we use that stuff, and essentially, if you look at those three changes, let's go from bottom up. So the last one is effectively a no-op. It's just a struct name change. The content is entirely identical. There's we literally just copied over the type. So this is not an issue for anyone, even if they would keep using the old one. The one above, the only relevant difference, if you talk about like how this JSON marshes, unmarshes, is a deprecated field, where we have a replacement field since at least a year. And it's like a metadata field, so it's, yeah, that should be fine. That basically leaves like as an impactful thing lifecycle hooks up there from beta 1 cluster, beta 2 cluster. And what I at least saw in our implementations is that the most stuff that we use is like, the cluster name, the cluster namespace, maybe the cluster spec topology class or something, or the version. And that's, yeah. But other people might use this in different ways, of course. Could be.
Yeah, I think like, from my perspective, at least what you've described here and kind of the research you've done and everything, I think this makes the most sense in terms of kind of the least disruptive of the two different options, or of the options available so far, I should say. But yeah, no, thank you for explaining this and kind of bringing it up and going into detail here. Does anyone else have questions or comments about this? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up. So unless, Stefan or Fabrizio, you have anything else to say, I guess this might be the end of the meeting. And I saw Matt, kind of preemptively typing in the provider updates. But yeah, unless there's anything else.
I just have one topic, which is not necessarily my topic, but it might make sense to talk about it while we're all here. Matt, what I wrote in the chat essentially, but it's a bit up to you. So we had an issue with Kubernetes 136 and that we fixed on main. And without that fix, essentially, you cannot install like a Kubernetes 136 alpha main version, whatever. And that is hitting some providers that are testing against Kubernetes main, which is a very nice thing to do. And it's an important signal for the community. And I think the open question, sorry, Matt, just chime in. Otherwise, I'm just telling everything.
No, keep going. I took it off the agenda here because we were having a discussion in the GitHub issue, but I didn't want to. But yeah, we can keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I talked about it with Fabrizio before. That's why I thought like maybe we can just finish it up here. So basically, our take on it is so the situation today is essentially core copy is testing against KK main, and for us it's relatively easy to do that, right? And we can keep putting fixes into copy main, and by that we can just fix our own CI figures. For providers, it's of course a lot. It's a lot more complicated because not every provider can just always stay on copy main and put the latest fix in there. I think what we don't want to do is backport it like by 2 versions, like in this example into 1.11. But I think what is definitely worth thinking about is to cherry pick it into 1.12, which was essentially your question then. And I think the concept, like the overall thing that we would do is essentially to say, okay, we make this like a full feature. So not just basically, oh, we're going to check backport something because it breaks somewhere here and there, but essentially by saying, okay, today our goal is essentially that when we develop a new release, let's just use concrete version numbers. So when we develop 1.13, our goal is to support 1.36, and it will only support it in 1.13. I think what we can do is we can expand this to say, okay, our goal is also to backport this by one more version essentially. So that 1.13 and 1.12 will support 1.36, which has a side effect essentially of if a provider wants to test against KK main, it's enough for them to stay on like 1.12 patch releases to have to get to a working setup against KK main and eventually against KK 1.36. But they're not forced to always stay on copy main, which I think is not a good ask in general for providers to force them for that. I think it's fair to say like we backport this by 1. We just don't want to go further, so that basically we don't have to support too many old copy releases against KK main. But I think 1 more minor is reasonable. I hope, Fabrizio, that mirrored what you were thinking when we were discussing it before. Let me know if that was going too far.
No, I let Matt talk first.
That makes perfect sense to me. And if we could backport this and maybe, excuse me, maybe in general have a policy of CAPI 1.12 doesn't support Kubernetes 1.36, but since people are doing this in general, since we've all been using it to test Kubernetes main, maybe, basically, if we could cherry pick this to 1.12, that would help us out, even though CAPC hasn't quite caught up with that. And then we can try and figure out some way to just consume the kubeadm image on its own with the fix and see if that works. I think that all makes perfect sense.
I think I would even go 1 step further and make this a policy. In the sense of that, basically, while we're working on our release, our goal is to, we have to put a disclaimer on there, like as long as it's feasible and if it would require large refactorings or something, then we still don't want to do breaking changes in 1.12, right? Usually it's fine, but a disclaimer should be there. But basically in general, make this a policy like, okay, hey, we're also going to support that KK version and that copy version, whatever that means exactly. And then also have the corresponding test coverage for it. Because today we essentially run copy main against Kubernetes main. But that would also mean that we also add an end-to-end test job that we test copy 1.12 against KK main, so that we also have the signal in core copy when it breaks and when it's got fixed and all of that, and not just, it's good that providers have it, but that we basically get a signal as early as possible in core copy on our side as well. So we can keep that easily green.
Yeah. And like you were saying, for providers, we can test against their main, but it's much more difficult to also consume CAPI main. It's much easier to just say, this is the released version of CAPI we're using. And so that's, I was thinking about how we could consume CAPI main as well, but it would be an order of magnitude more work in all these jobs. So,
we basically do it in CAPV. But it is basically because we are sort of co-developing core copy and CAPV. So, in some release cycles, we're basically bumping the core copy dependencies in CAPV like every 2 weeks. And then we're also using the latest images just to make sure that whatever we do on both sides just works. But that depends on release cycle. We only do it if it's necessary. One additional point. As a provider, if I remember correctly, I might have to double check that. As a provider, you can either, with our end-to-end test framework, you can either do something like, hey, I want to use copy 1.12.1, but I think you can also do something like that you want to consume latest 1.12 release branch. Just also makes it like one step easier to not have to wait for a monthly patch release if we need fixes. I have to look up how that exactly works, but there should be like a manifest that we publish for every release branch where you can get the latest nightly image that matches up and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Alrighty. So
Yeah,
that
thanks for going over that again. Yeah, appreciate it.
So basically, I would follow up. I mean, the one quick immediate thing is just cherry pick and merge, but then I'll take a look at the policy and do an update on our test infra jobs that we also have the job on 112. And I think that should cover it. Maybe also the community version support policy. I have to see how that's phrased. Yeah, not maybe. We should. So.
Yeah, Fabrizio, did you have a follow-up there?
No, just two things. So one is that it is really important to put a disclaimer, because we cannot basically foresee that the kind of change that we have to do for support Kubernetes version. Historically, we know that in most of the release, they were easy, and so easy also to backward. But in some cases, they were not so easy. And so, yeah, we have to put a good disclaimer there. And second is that these are another one thing where it becomes a recurring job, and where we can really use help from the community to have this going. This will imply that we have to set up a new end-to-end test today, but in the next release we have to set up it keeps recurring, this job. And like every other task, we have a good prior art, good issue that people can PR that can be somehow look at it to do the job. We really need folks to step up and help in doing so.
Excellent point, Fabrizio. And yeah, like, tech debt and this kind of rolling cycle of, the way these things get updated. Yeah, somehow we have to bring more people in. Okay. Anything else on Stefan's topic about the control plane kubelet local mode cherry pick there? Okay. Fabrizio, you're highlighting this heads up from DIMS about the failing CI jobs.
Yes. So
trying to open up that thread, but I couldn't get it working.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe the link is wrong. I will check it later. So there is, in the cluster API channel, there is a post from thread from DIMS. The post dates back. It looks like yesterday. So it is a post from yesterday. I'm still catching up about email and but it looks like there was an email on the developer mail list about a call for action to work on tests that are failing since many days. And Oh yeah, Stephanie is being on two different mailing lists, so I'm still catching up. And the post in Slack from Deems is bringing up a report of cluster API and cluster API providers jobs that are failing since many days, and there are jobs that are failing by 600 days, 700 days. So yeah, unfortunately there are even jobs from providers that are have been archived, and I don't know why they are running. So probably we have to do some cleanup. I will try to make sure that this communication is echoed in different provider channels, so it try to reach as much as possible the right folks for the job. But please help me to spread the word that there is a call for action in the Kubernetes community to get rid of jobs that are always failing, which does not make sense at all.
And by the way, this is wasting a lot of compute, so we are burning a lot of money, and it's actually a concern.
And Stefan had his hand up as well.
Yeah, Fabrizio, let's take a look together. I took a brief look at it, and a bunch of stuff is CapV stuff, but the problem here is basically that the peering is not working, so that's not an issue that we can solve, honestly. So I think we also have to mirror some of that back, essentially, that we need help from Cicade's infra to fix, like, Kubernetes infrastructure so that our jobs are not failing after 6 minutes.
Okay.
So it's basically, I don't know who took a look, but it's basically a dashboard for like permanently failing jobs. Then there is a dashboard. I mean, the dashboards are very nice, very good thing, by the way, don't get me wrong. There are also dashboards around like frequently failing stuff, etc., etc. And in a bunch of those categories, basically, our CapV jobs that have problems with network peering are pretty high up. But we can't fix them by ourselves because we don't have access to that stuff.
Okay, yeah. Do we have? I guess do we have a link to one of those dashboards? I was going to try to link it in here, but I can't. I'm having trouble getting into Slack and finding this the connection to the message that Fabrizio put up is not happening for me. I don't know why.
I'll try to find a mailing list thing. I have it in my.
Or if you're in that thread, just ping me on that thread on Slack. I have Slack open, but I have Slack open in like the app, not the web browser. So.
I just posted a link to the mailing list at least.
Oh,
I think you
awesome.
can also add
Yeah.
that link. I don't have the Slack link myself.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's probably even better.
Yeah, and if you click on that index HTML down there,
Yeah, great.
just if you want to show it for a second.
Yeah, where was it? Oh, this one. Yeah.
The link that I shared in chat, you can click the actual relevant copy problems.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I think the nested provider is the one that was archived, but
Wow.
the jobs were not dropped.
That's impressive. Failing for 776 days.
That's the job probably exists, and it just tries to poke at a script that no longer exists, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's probably some stuff where probably like the SIG sort of has to, I don't know, Fabrizio and Lumi, or I can also help take over because I mean, if the project is archived, there's probably nobody working on it anymore. So maybe just have to delete the job and be done with it.
Classic nil pointer.
And then there's a lot of stuff that we should probably just fade out to the corresponding providers.
Can somebody summarize, please, from all the existing providers? I know AWS and GCP are still active. What about DigitalOcean? Do we still have as an active project DigitalOcean?
I don't know.
So I checked the provider when we started working on V1 Beta 2, in V1 Beta 2, and I did not notice the providers that were abandoned. So they were sort of all keeping up with copy version, etc., etc. Of course, someone was lagging behind more than others, but they were no more than 2 or 3 copy version ahead. So it seems to me that they are all worked. Digital Ocean, we are having a question from now and there. So I don't know if at which frequencies they're releasing or whatever, but they seems
PR
decently
merged,
maintained
last
for
month. So
yeah.
I guess they're probably just ignoring the fact that they have consistently failing jobs. Maybe one action item for us could be to ping them every single channel, and if they don't respond, we're just gonna go and delete some of the jobs from the proc config, and that's all.
yeah,
I think that's a fair approach.
I think also a lot of people don't necessarily know that they can get alerted via email when jobs are failing. So it also might be that they just lost track of some of their jobs and are not, like polling the dashboards or something.
I mean, they can keep tabs on the dashboards, right?
Yeah. No, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying maybe they're not polling the dashboards, and maybe, or maybe the job is not in the dashboard. And maybe they don't know that they can be notified by email. So maybe on top of asking, like, hey, can you take a look at this job, we can also like inform them of, hey, you can add your email here. And then you get a bunch of pings if that happens again.
Yeah, it's disappointing to see that the second highest failure here for this long is just a failure to push images and whatnot. I mean, it's like, I imagine the cloud stack provider developers are still working on this stuff, but it seems like 2 years without an image push is,
Yeah, I mean, the question is
problematic.
if anyone is using that image push here.
Right, exactly. And I'm kind of curious why nothing appears in the prow status for it either. So, oh well. This is good. Thank you for sharing all these links and everything, though, because I think for anybody who's not here, maybe watching later, this is the way you go through and kind of debug these things and figure out what's going on and everything. So sharing this, I think, with more people is probably better.
Lubomir, is that okay if we pair maybe when you have time tomorrow, we try to start with a first round of ping and try to get this moving as a SIG?
Yeah, maybe if it's okay.
I will ping you offline and we figure it out how to proceed. Okay, thank you.
All right. I guess we can go on to the next topic then, unless there's any more questions about that. Lubomir, please. The kubeADM drops V1 beta 3.
I opened this PR a couple of days ago. It's not really super relevant as long as Capi is managing the appropriate APIs for the different versions. I think you started running V1 beta 4 a while back when it was already enabled. So that's okay. One of the problems we saw is that there was a CapZ failure, and I was suspicious that this is caused by some sort of a combination of kind version and kubeADM version, but somebody from Azure told me that it's actually something else. But a real problem here is that latest kind does not support kubeADM V1 beta 4 completely, which means that if you have something downstream maybe that is running an older version of kind with the latest Kubernetes in kubeADM, it will fail. And Ben, the other from kind, is planning to release a new version of kind that will support V1 beta 4. Unfortunately, it's a quite complicated change because they first have to go and fix a bunch of stuff in test infra. The contention here is related to the breaking change in kubeADM related to extra arcs. As you know, they changed in V1 beta 4. And test infra naively hardcoded a bunch of bash scripts that SAD and change things very non-constructively without structure, like without double YQ, things like that. And they basically have to go and fix like 10 different scripts. It's really broken. And I don't know, I just wanted to mention this. If you happen to use kind for bootstrap clusters, you have to be wary of this particular contention that is happening here.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing that up, Lubomir. Does anybody have questions about this? I see someone's raised their hand. I can't see who though.
Oh, I raised my hand. Yeah, no question, just to add. Thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, I think you're fine in core copy, KCP, etc., etc. Because essentially we are always using the latest API version as soon as possible, Kubernetes version-wise. And we're dropping support for ours when we drop support for the Kubernetes version so basically we're going to drop support for beta 3 and cluster API as soon as we drop support for the Kubernetes version that does not have beta 4. So I think we should be good. Definitely good to know what's going on there. I assume and hope we're also we're not modifying kind. So we create kind clusters in a bunch of different places, in a bunch of different ways. I hope none of them are affected, but at least we have a pointer if it somehow stops working.
Yes, from my understanding, kind expects a V1 beta 3, and I think this is related to patches. So basically, if you have some sort of kind supports patches as well, and the way they deal with patches, they made a mistake to use unversioned patches. That's really not a good idea because you underline you are patching essentially either kubeadm some API or another API. And I think that's the core of the problem here. But basically, as long as you are just calling the latest kind with the kubeadm v1 beta 4 version and the version of kubeadm that no longer has v1 beta 3, I think it might work. The problem we are seeing is related to kind config. I haven't tested it, but I'm just offered to Ben the Elder to start fixing some of those test infra scripts so that we can unblock KK and we can have some broader testing here because it's quite surprising that kind was a bit stuck on v1 beta 3 for such a long time. And we have to unblock it.
All right. Yeah, again, thank you, Lubomir. Are there any other questions or comments about that? Okay. All right, that brings us to the end of our regular discussion topics, but we'll go on to our provider updates here. I see Fabrizio's added something for CapV.
Yeah, just a quick one. So back in December, 1 week after we released Cluster API, we also released CapV, and it is using the latest version of Capi. It has Kubernetes 135 support. So this should give a good signal to all the providers that want to do the same bump as soon as possible.
Awesome, thank you. Great to hear. All right. If nobody has any other ad hoc topics or anything, then we will call this meeting to a close. Going once, going twice. All right. Happy New Year, everyone. Looking forward to a good 2026. And thanks for coming up.
Thanks, Mike.